This time, we're taking a trip back to 1946, India,
A pivotal year.
right on the edge of independence.
Yeah.
We've got this whole stack of books and
A
articles
lot to unpack.
really digging in to see, the drama, the
The
decisions.
human stories.
Yeah, the human side of it all.
Absolutely.
So, okay, let's just set the stage a little bit. 1946, the British are leaving.
That we know.
That's a certainty. But the HRW is the big question mark, right? And we see, I think in these sources, there are 4 key factors pushing that exit.
Yeah, and those are really essential for understanding the context, right?
Yeah.
So we can start with the Quit India movement of 42. I mean, this is not just a protest. This was a declaration.
Right.
It's like we refuse to cooperate with you.
Yeah.
It showed just the massive scale of the demand for independence.
And then you've got Subhas Chandra Bose, the Indian National Army, operating during World War II,
Right.
allied with the Axis powers.
Controversial.
Very controversial, but one that really, just challenged British authority even further. And what I thought was fascinating, we were reading about the Red Fort trials of the INA officers.
Oh, yeah.
It basically becomes this public spectacle.
Yeah.
It almost galvanized support for independence even more.
Yeah, it backfired.
Yeah.
I mean, they were trying to, make an example of these people, but it really
Totally backfired.
turned into a rallying point.
Yeah.
And, it wasn't just on land, right? You have the Royal Indian Navy Mutiny,
Oh, right.
which showed that, even within the British Armed Forces, this desire for self-rule, it's reaching a boiling point,
Yeah.
all against this backdrop of a world recovering from World War II.
A world where Britain itself is exhausted, right?
Oh, yeah.
Economically, politically, holding on to India is just becoming less feasible, increasingly unpopular back home.
And very expensive.
Very expensive. And then into this charged atmosphere, you have the 1946 elections.
Yeah.
Talk about a complex political landscape.
Oh, yeah, the results were really striking.
Yeah.
The Congress wins most of the provinces,
Yeah.
but the Muslim League, under Jinnah,
Under Jinnah's leadership.
yeah, they gain immense power, particularly in Bengal and Sindh.
Right.
And I think this is where Jinnah's transformation becomes so fascinating to look at.
It's really interesting.
Because remember, earlier in his career, he was seen as someone who championed Hindu-Muslim unity.
Right.
He even opposed Gandhi's Khilafat movement
I didn't realize that.
because he thought it was too religiously charged.
Oh, wow.
So to see him then championing this idea of a separate Muslim nation, Pakistan, it's a huge shift.
So do you think, was it purely political ambition, as some of the sources seem to imply, or was it really some kind of deeper ideological change? Like, what led him to this point?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, and you
Yeah.
see different perspectives in the sources, right?
Right.
Some argue that he saw an opportunity,
Yeah.
to consolidate power, exploiting the communal anxiety to gain political ground. Others suggest that he genuinely believed a separate Muslim state was necessary to protect Muslim interests in a post-British India.
It's hard to know.
Yeah, it's hard to know.
It was in his mind.
And I think the sources reflect that ambiguity.
Yeah, so you have this incredibly tense atmosphere, right? The British are leaving, but how that power is going to be transferred is totally unclear.
Yeah.
And this rising tide of communal tension, and it's into this cauldron that Gandhi makes his radical suggestion,
It's remarkable.
make Jinnah the prime minister.
Of a united India.
Yeah. It's just like, whoa.
I mean, it just speaks volumes about Gandhi, right?
Yeah.
This willingness to put aside power, political power, for the sake of unity,
Yeah.
even if it meant handing the reins to someone whose vision differed so drastically from his own.
But it's a proposal that Nehru and Patel,
The other key figures in Congress.
absolutely, they're just not ready to accept it. Having witnessed Jinnah's tactics, which were increasingly divisive,
Yeah.
they saw this as a dangerous gamble.
Yeah, they had their doubts for sure.
I'd love to know more about their reactions. Did any of the sources give us any personal accounts of, their discussions with Gandhi about this? What were their primary concerns?
Yeah, several sources delve into those behind closed door conversations.
All right.
While respecting Gandhi's commitment to peace.
Right.
They argued that placing Jinnah at the helm, given everything that had been happening, his rhetoric, his actions, it could further inflame those tensions
Right.
and potentially lead to a fractured and unstable India.
So again, this clash of approaches, this tension between idealism and pragmatism.
Yeah.
Gandhi's clinging to this vision of a united India, while others are starting to see partition as almost an inevitability.
A looming shadow.
Yeah, and then into this already volatile mix
Right.
enters the cabinet mission plan.
The British, in a last-ditch effort to find some solution.
To try to salvage something.
Yeah, they send this 3-member committee to India
Okay.
with a plan, and it's a complex plan. Picture this. They propose dividing the country into 3 groups of provinces.
3.
3, each with varying degrees of autonomy,
Okay.
but maintaining a single central government.
Okay.
So on the surface, it's like a compromise.
Right.
It's a way to try to appease both Congress and the Muslim League.
It sounds incredibly intricate. Do our sources go into like the specifics of how this 3-tiered structure was supposed to function?
They do, especially some of the academic papers you provided,
Yeah.
really break it down.
Okay.
And initially, Jinnah accepts it.
He does.
Yeah, he sees it as a step towards eventual autonomy for the Muslim-majority provinces.
Okay.
But then Nehru, in a public statement, implies that Congress could potentially modify the plan once in power. Yeah, and that's where things start to unravel.
Yeah, that's not going to go over. Well, I mean, do we know, was that statement just like a blunder on Nehru's part, or was this plan just kind of doomed from the start regardless?
Yeah, historians still debate that.
Yeah.
Some argue that Nehru's statement was a tactical misstep that fueled Jinnah's suspicions about Congress's true intentions.
Right.
Others believe that the plan itself, with all its complexities, its ambiguities, was just inherently fragile and likely to collapse no matter what Nehru said.
Right.
But Jinnah, already wary,
Of course.
he sees this statement as a betrayal,
Right.
a confirmation that Congress could not be trusted to uphold the agreement.
And this becomes like a turning point.
A turning point.
Yeah, pushing Jinnah further down this path of direct action.
Towards that confrontation.
Yeah, and setting the stage for, I mean, really a much darker chapter in this story.
Yes, things are about to escalate dramatically.
So the cabinet mission plan collapses, tensions are already sky high, and then Jinnah makes this really fateful decision.
Direct action day.
August 16th, 1946.
Right.
Urging Muslims to fight for Pakistan.
It's a call to action.
This isn't just rhetoric.
No.
It's a call to action, and unfortunately, it is answered with violence.
And this is where things take a very dark turn. Bengal, with Calcutta as its epicenter,
Right.
becomes the stage for just some of the most brutal violence of this entire period.
It's really hard to read these accounts,
It's chilling.
you know, of the city descending into chaos.
Yeah, mobs rampaging.
Homes set ablaze, thousands killed and injured.
This is just utter chaos.
And the figure of Hussein Suhrawardi,
The chief minister of Bengal at the time.
yeah, looms large in this narrative.
Yeah, he's a controversial figure.
He's been dubbed the Butcher of Bengal by some historians.
Right.
What do our sources say about his role in this? I mean, was he complicit or was he just overwhelmed by a situation that was spiraling out of control?
It's a question that historians are still debating to this day.
Yeah.
Some argue that Suhrawardi, a Muslim League leader, deliberately turned a blind eye to the violence or even encouraged it
As a waiter.
as a way to pressure Congress and the British to accept partition.
Right.
Others contend that he was just overwhelmed, right?
Yeah.
Unable to control the mob violence that just engulfed Calcutta.
It's a reminder that leadership, especially in times of crisis,
Oh, yeah.
comes with a really heavy responsibility.
Absolutely.
And while all of this political drama is unfolding, there's another story taking place.
Yeah.
One of individual courage amid the chaos.
Gandhi,
Gandhi, amidst these riots, chooses to go to Noakhali.
a remote region in Bengal.
Right.
And this isn't just a visit.
It's a pilgrimage.
It's a pilgrimage. Gandhi, in his late 70s, walking barefoot
Wow.
from village to village,
Yeah.
appealing for peace,
Right.
urging Hindus and Muslims to
Wow.
live together in harmony.
Imagine that image, right?
It's powerful.
This frail figure amidst the smoldering ruins of
Yeah.
these communities that have just been torn apart.
Embodying his philosophy of nonviolent resistance.
Yeah, it really is an incredible image. It makes you wonder, though, while Gandhi's on this grassroots mission,
Right.
what's happening on the political stage?
Yeah, good question.
Are the leaders engaging in similar efforts to try to quell this violence, or are they just preoccupied with power and partition?
Yeah. And I think that contrast is really striking.
Yeah.
While Gandhi is trying to rebuild these shattered communities,
Right.
the political negotiations are falling apart.
Yeah.
The gap between his vision and the reality on the ground is just widening.
And it's into this increasingly fractured landscape that Lord Mountbatten arrives.
India's last viceroy.
He is tasked with trying to find a solution, preferably a united India.
Right.
But he's walking into a powder keg.
Absolutely.
What do the sources reveal about how he approached this seemingly impossible task?
Well, he tries several different strategies, right?
Okay.
Initially, he envisions a plan where provinces could choose their own destiny,
Okay.
joining India, Pakistan, or even becoming independent entities.
Wow.
So this was called the three-nation theory,
Okay.
and it actually gained support from Jinnah
Okay.
and even from the Bengali chief minister, Surawardi.
So for a moment, it seems like maybe Mountbatten is going to pull off this surprising solution,
Right.
but it's Nehru who really throws a wrench into the works. Right. He vehemently opposes this fragmentation, this idea of further dividing India,
He sees it as a betrayal.
fearing it'll just lead to a balkanized India vulnerable to instability and external pressures.
A fragmented subcontinent.
Yeah, and his opposition creates a deadlock.
It pushes negotiations to the brink.
And with time running out, a new plan emerges.
Right. Hastily drafted by VP Menon.
A key advisor to Mountbatten.
Yeah.
And this becomes the plan that ultimately leads to partition.
The division of India and Pakistan.
But the way it is implemented, especially the drawing of the boundary lines,
Oh, yeah.
adds another layer of tragedy to this whole story.
Yeah. The boundary lines are really where things get messy.
They give this task to a British lawyer, Cyril Radcliffe, who, and this is almost unbelievable, has no prior knowledge of India.
It's a baffling decision when you think about it.
It's mind-boggling.
This man who'd never set foot in India
Right.
is handed these maps,
Yeah.
census data,
Yeah.
and told, okay, divide a subcontinent
Yeah.
with 5 weeks to do it.
And to make matters worse,
Oh, yeah.
they keep the boundary line secret until the very last moment.
Right, adding to the anxiety and the confusion.
It just seems like a recipe for disaster.
It was.
Do the sources give us any insight into why they chose Radcliffe? Why someone with absolutely no understanding of India's complex, social and geographical landscape?
Well, some sources suggest that the British, eager to just get out of India as quickly as possible,
Right.
opted for someone they perceived as impartial.
Someone who wouldn't be influenced by local politics.
Yeah, unbiased.
Ah.
Others argue it was just expediency.
They just needed somebody.
Radcliffe was available, and he was willing to take on the task, however daunting.
But regardless of the reasons.
The consequences were devastating.
Because as soon as those borders are announced,
Chaos ensues.
chaos ensues. Millions find themselves on the wrong side of the line.
Yeah.
Triggering one of the largest mass migrations in human history.
It's hard to even comprehend the scale.
Hindus and Sikhs in Pakistan fleeing to India. Muslims in India fleeing to Pakistan. I mean, imagine the human suffering.
It's staggering.
Families uprooted, homes abandoned.
Yeah, people making these journeys on foot, by train, any way they can.
Yeah.
And the sources describe scenes of just unimaginable horror.
Yeah.
Trains arriving at their destinations filled with corpses,
Oh my God.
victims of violence, exhaustion, disease.
It's a stark reminder that freedom, even when it's hard-won,
Yes.
doesn't always translate into peace and harmony,
No, it doesn't.
and that the human cost of division
Can be immeasurable.
can be immeasurable. And the tragedy of partition wasn't just about displacement, it was about the breakdown of humanity itself.
Yes, absolutely.
The violence wasn't random.
No.
It was orchestrated.
Fueled by religious hatred, political opportunism.
Communities that had lived side by side for generations turning on each other.
It's heartbreaking.
And the stories of women during this period,
Particularly horrific.
I mean, our sources talk about widespread sexual violence,
Abduction.
forced conversions.
It's a dark stain on the history of both India and Pakistan.
It really is. It makes you wonder, how did things deteriorate so rapidly? What factors beyond the political maneuvering contributed to this explosion of violence?
Well, you have to look at the historical context, right?
Yeah.
Decades of colonial rule had created this system that often favored one community over another,
Right.
sowing these seeds of resentment.
Yeah.
And then you have politicians on both sides of the divide
Right.
exploiting these tensions for their own gain,
Yeah.
using inflammatory rhetoric to incite violence.
So you have these macro forces at play.
Colonialism, political ambition, religious tensions
But it's the individual stories, the human toll,
that really bring it home.
that really bring the tragedy to focus.
Yeah.
It's easy to get lost in these grand narratives of history,
Right.
but it's the personal accounts
The voices of those who lived through it.
that remind us of the true cost of division.
Absolutely. And amidst all the darkness,
Yeah.
it's important to remember that there were also stories of courage,
Right.
resilience, and even moments of humanity. Ordinary people caught in these extraordinary circumstances helping each other,
Right.
sharing what little they had, offering shelter, support,
Those acts of kindness.
those flickers of light amidst the darkness.
So crucial to remember.
They remind us that even in the face of immense suffering,
Yeah.
the human spirit can endure and compassion can prevail.
But the question remains, as we kind of move into the next chapter of this story,
Right.
how do these newly independent nations born out of such trauma even begin to heal and rebuild? Wow, we've been through a lot in this deep dive.
A lot to unpack.
The maneuvering, the violence, the displacement. I mean, it's a lot to process.
It's heavy stuff.
It really is. So, okay, we've reached August 15th, 1947. Independence has arrived, but obviously the journey is far from over.
Oh yeah, this is just the beginning.
How do these newly formed nations, India and Pakistan, even begin to grapple with the aftermath of such a tumultuous birth?
I mean, it's a monumental task for
Yeah.
both.
Yeah.
India, with its vast and diverse population,
Right.
faces this immediate challenge of integration.
You've got hundreds of princely states.
Oh yeah, we can't forget about them.
Yeah, we talked about before.
Right, they weren't automatically absorbed into India just because independence was declared.
Right. Each state had its own ruler, its own treaties with the British. It's almost mind-boggling to think about how they managed to bring them all together. Our sources mention Sardar Patel
A key figure in the Congress Party.
playing a really pivotal role.
Absolutely. Patel, he's often called the Iron Man of India for a reason.
Yeah.
He took on this Herculean task
Yeah.
using diplomacy, political pressure, sometimes even military force,
Wow.
to persuade these rulers to accede to India.
So he's dealing with these princely states, trying to unify the country, but at the same time, the scars of partition are still incredibly raw.
Oh, yeah.
You have millions displaced, communities shattered, and the violence, while subsiding, hasn't completely disappeared.
Right, there's still this underlying tension.
How do they even begin to address this deep societal trauma?
It's a long and complex process. On the one hand, you have leaders like Gandhi still advocating for peace and reconciliation,
Right.
urging people to let go of a hatred and rebuild their lives.
Right.
But at the same time, there's this deep sense of insecurity, this feeling that the violence could erupt again at any moment.
And I imagine the political climate isn't making things any easier. We've talked about these different visions for India, right? Gandhi's dream of a united, peaceful nation versus this more pragmatic approach focused on consolidating power and establishing a strong central government. How does this play out in those early years of independence?
Well, it's a period of intense debate and ideological struggle.
Yeah.
You have figures like Nehru, India's first prime minister,
Right.
determined to build a modern, secular, democratic India.
Right.
They push for social reforms, economic development, and a non-aligned foreign policy.
It's a really ambitious vision, especially considering the circumstances.
Extremely ambitious.
What about on the other side of this newly drawn border? What challenges does Pakistan face in its infancy?
Well, Pakistan's challenges are unique and arguably even greater.
In what way?
Well, they have to build a nation literally from scratch,
Right.
establishing new institutions,
Yeah.
drafting a constitution, creating a functioning government.
Wow.
And all of this while dealing with this influx of millions of refugees fleeing from India.
It's like they're trying to build a house while a storm is raging around them.
Yeah, it's an incredibly difficult situation.
And then there's the whole question of identity.
Right.
Jinnah championed this idea of Pakistan as a homeland for Muslims.
Right, a Muslim-majority nation.
But what does that actually mean in practice? How do they reconcile this vision of an Islamic state with the realities of governing a diverse population?
It's a question that continues to shape Pakistan's political and social landscape even today.
Yeah.
Different factions emerge, some pushing for a more theocratic state,
Right.
others advocating for a more inclusive, pluralistic society.
And complicating matters further, you have the relationship with India?
Right. The two nations born from the same womb of independence,
Right.
now locked in this cycle of suspicion and hostility.
The wounds of partition are fresh.
Yeah, the memory of the violence is vivid.
And the unresolved issue of Kashmir just further inflames those tensions?
Kashmir becomes a flashpoint,
Yeah.
leading to wars, military standoffs, just this persistent atmosphere of mistrust.
It really drains resources, hinders any kind of cooperation, and casts a shadow over the whole region.
It shapes the geopolitics of South Asia for decades to come.
It's a reminder that even when a colonial power departs,
Right.
the legacy of its rule, the divisions it fostered.
Can continue to haunt the newly independent nations.
So as we step back and look at this larger picture, what key takeaways emerge from this deep dive into India's path to freedom? What can we learn from this really complex and often tragic chapter in history?
I think one crucial insight is that independence is not a singular event.
Right.
It's not a finish line.
It's a process.
It's a process, a continuous journey of nation building, reconciliation, and self-discovery.
And it's messy.
It's messy, filled with challenges, setbacks, and unforeseen consequences.
Yeah, it's also a reminder that freedom comes at a price.
A heavy price.
And often that price is paid not by those in positions of power, but by ordinary people caught in the crossfire.
The millions displaced, the lives lost, the communities shattered.
These are the enduring legacies of partition.
A testament to the human cost of division.
But amidst the darkness, there's also light, right?
There are stories of resilience, of courage, of kindness.
The resilience of the human spirit, the acts of kindness and courage amidst just unimaginable suffering.
The determination to rebuild, to create a better future.
Those stories offer a glimmer of hope.
A reminder that even in the face of tragedy, humanity can endure and even flourish.
It's been a heavy but incredibly insightful journey.
A lot to think about.
This deep dive has taken us through the tumultuous birth of a nation, the struggles, the triumphs, and the legacies that continue to shape India and Pakistan today.
It's a story that's still unfolding.
Yeah, it's a story that reminds us of the power of ideas.
The complexities of history.
And the enduring human capacity for both great good and great evil.
Absolutely.
We hope this deep dive has inspired you to explore further.
To keep learning.
To delve deeper into the stories and the legacies of this pivotal period. Because understanding the past and all its complexities is essential to navigating the present and shaping a better future. Until next time, keep diving deep.